Milo has $412 to his name. This morning he learned that the hardest dollar he will ever save is not the first one. It is the 100,000th. Milo is 28 years old. He is a junior associate at Big Cheese Industries, a company that makes cheese and meetings about cheese and meetings about the meetings. Every morning he rides an escalator that never quite seems to reach the top. He has noticed this. He has decided not to think about it. This morning, scrolling on his phone before a status call he did not need to attend, Milo read a single sentence that lodged itself somewhere behind his ribs. The first 100,000 is the hardest. After that, it gets easier. Milo opened his banking app. $412 looked back at him. He did some quiet arithmetic and felt slightly unwell. So the question that will follow Milo for the next 20 minutes is this. Why is the first $100,000 harder to build than the entire next million stacked on top of it? And underneath that question is a second one, quieter, the kind Milo does not yet know how to ask. What if the hard part is not the part everyone keeps warning him about? Over the next 20 minutes, Milo will try the obvious solution and watch it sag. He will meet a rat who already crossed the line, and another rat who will explain, gently and without mercy, why crossing it is not the same task for everyone. He will find one number that quietly rearranges the entire problem. He will ask his uncle a question and receive, instead of an answer, a better question. None of it will make Milo rich. That is not what this is. By the end, Milo will be exactly one small step less ordinary than he is right now. The wheel will still be there. It will just be turning a little more slowly. To understand why $100,000 feels so impossibly far away, you have to understand Milo's week, which is the same as all of Milo's other weeks. Rent takes $950 on the first of the month, removed before Milo can form an opinion about it. His salary arrives and departs like a train that does not stop. There is a coffee he buys every Tuesday, a small ceremony of self-respect. $4.79 for a drink that cost $2.49 the year he started this job. Milo tells himself he has earned it. He tells himself this every Tuesday. The narrator has stopped keeping count. Milo's savings account holds $412, and it has held roughly that amount for 11 months, the way a puddle holds water, filling slightly, evaporating slightly, never becoming a lake. He has a credit card with a balance he treats the way one treats a strange noise in the engine, which is to say, by turning up the radio. He is not reckless. He is not exactly lazy. He is simply running a household on a current that flows out as fast as it flows in. And there is a name for this, and the name is most people. Because here, Milo is not alone, which is either comforting or the precise opposite. According to the Federal Reserve's most recent survey of how American households actually live, when adults were asked whether they could cover a sudden $400 expense using cash or its equivalent, only 63% said yes. The remaining 37% said they would have to borrow it, or sell something, or simply could not cover it at all. Milo, with his $412, is sitting almost exactly on that line. He is, statistically speaking, the coin that could land either way. The same survey found that the answer splits hard by education and circumstance. Among rats with a 4-year degree, more than 80% could absorb the $400 without flinching. Among those without a high school diploma, fewer than a third could. The $400 question is not really about $400. It is about who has any cushion at all. For most of his 20s, Milo believed the problem was simple. He did not have enough money. Get more money, he reasoned, and the puddle becomes a lake. It is a clean theory. It has exactly one flaw, which Milo is about to discover at 11:47 on a Tuesday night. And then Milo found the calculator. It began, as these things do, in the dark, 11:47 to be precise, the hour at which Milo does his most ambitious thinking and his very worst planning. He opened a compound interest calculator, the kind that promises to turn small numbers into enormous ones if you simply believe and feed it time. Milo typed in his hopes. He told it he would invest $1,000 every month, a number he did not currently have but deeply admired.
He gave it a return of 7% a year,
Roughly what the broad stock market has returned, on average, after inflation, across the long stretches of history Milo had read about but had not personally lived through. Then he asked it the only question that mattered. How long until $100,000? The calculator thought for no time at all and returned a number Milo did not love. A little under 7 years. 6.5 in fact, and only if he never missed a single month. Never had a bad month, never had a car, a cavity, or a quiet personal crisis. Milo sat with that. Then he did the thing that almost everyone does. He decided the villain must be the 7%. If he could just find a better return, a hotter stock, a faster bet, the thing his coworker would not stop talking about at lunch, then he could skip the boring part entirely and arrive early. This is the intuitive move. Most rats make it. Milo made it with enthusiasm and a second tab.
which is roughly when he ran into Victor.
Victor is older, owns a vest, and crossed the 100,000 line a long time ago. Milo asked him how he had done it, fully expecting a secret. Victor did not have a secret. Victor had a smaller apartment in a cheaper decade when rent was a different animal and a coffee was just a coffee. Victor had simply put money away, dully, monthly, for years, into the most boring instruments he could find, back when the finish line stood closer because everything cost less to reach it. He had not beaten the market, he had outlasted it. Milo listened and felt something quietly deflate. Victor's path was real. It was also a path through a country whose streets have since been renamed. The advice was true and slightly useless, like a beautiful map of a city that no longer exists. Milo thanked him and went looking for someone who would tell him the bad news on purpose. He took his deflation to Eddie. Eddie reads.
Eddie is the kind of rat who answers optimism with footnotes, which is exhausting and occasionally necessary. Before we go any further, Eddie said, understand who can even afford to sit at this table. He pointed Milo back to the same survey of family finances. The typical American family, the one standing exactly in the middle of everything, had a net worth of $192,900 in the most recent figures. Promising, thought Milo. Then Eddie showed him the second number, the cruel one. The average net worth was over $1 million. When the middle and the average sit that far apart, Eddie said, it means a small number of very large fortunes are dragging the average upward, while most rats live nowhere near it. The family in the middle earns around $70,000 a year, before the rent and the cheese and the $4 coffee take their cut. And across the whole country, the share of income that households actually manage to save has been hovering down around 4%, 4 cents on the dollar after everything. So here's the honest part, the part the late-night calculators always leave out. Milo, said Eddie, the first 100,000 is hard for a reason that has almost nothing to do with your discipline. It is hard because it has to come almost entirely out of the gap between what you earn and what you spend. And for an enormous number of rats, that gap is thin or closed or quietly underwater. The instruction to simply save your first 100,000 assumes that you have a surplus to save in the first place. Telling a rat with no margin to go find margin, Eddie said, is not advice. It is the problem itself, read back slowly in a calmer voice. Milo said nothing, neither did the narrator. Milo could have stopped right there, defeated and entirely correct. Instead, he kept reading, because Milo, for all his flaws, is curious.
And he found the thing that changed the shape of the whole problem. A quick and honest pause here. Milo is not a financial advisor, neither is the narrator. What follows is simply what Milo found in publicly available research and then tried on himself, in the dark, at 11:47 on various Tuesdays. It started with a line from Charlie Munger, the investor who spent 60 years sitting beside Warren Buffett and saying fewer, sharper things than almost anyone alive. At a shareholder meeting in the 1990s, asked by a young man how an ordinary person builds wealth, Munger did not soften it. The first 100,000, he said, is brutal, but you simply have to do it. by any honest means and however much you have to scrimp. And after that, you can ease off the gas a little. He explained the idea more gently in a biography of him titled Damn Right, written by Janet Lowe. Getting wealthy, Munger said there, is like rolling a snowball. It helps to start at the top of a very long hill. It helps to start early, and it helps, he added, to roll that snowball for a very, very long time. Here is the part that rearranged the furniture inside Milo's head. At the very beginning, the snowball is too small to pick up any snow at all. That is the entire secret. When Milo has $100, a 7% return earns him $7 in a year. The growth is a rounding error. His own savings are doing every bit of the work, by hand, in the cold. But watch what happens further down the hill. At $100,000, that same 7% becomes $7,000 a year. That is almost $600 a month appearing out of nowhere, very nearly matching the $1,000 that Milo sweats to put in. And at $1 million, 7% becomes $70,000 a year. The snowball is now adding nearly 6 times what Milo himself adds, while Milo does nothing at all but stay out of its way and not knock it over. Milo opened the calculator again, this time honestly. The first $100,000 took 6.5 years. The very same $100,000 leap made just before the first million took about 15 months. 5 times faster for the identical pile of money. He had spent years blaming the 7%. The 7% was never the problem. At the start, it had barely even shown up. There is a writer named Morgan Housel who put a finer point on it in a book called The Psychology of Money. Housel points out that Warren Buffett, the most famous investor who has ever lived, did not get rich primarily because he was the best stock picker on earth, though he was very good. He got rich because he started as a child and refused to stop. The overwhelming majority of Buffett's fortune was built after his 65th birthday, not because the man got smarter at 65, because that is when the snowball, after decades, finally got big enough to roll on its own. The engine, it turns out, was never the return. The engine was time, and the willingness to be boring inside it. This reframing of everything was, for Milo, a feeling he enjoys slightly too much. For about a day, he was electric. Then he had to go and live inside the boring truth, which is that the early years are powered not by clever returns, but by the unglamorous gap between earning and spending. The survey calls it the savings rate. An older book called it something heavier. In Your Money or Your Life, Vicki Robin and Joe Dominguez argued that the dollars you save are not really dollars at all. They are hours of your life energy, converted into a number on a screen. When Milo looked at his $4.79 coffee through that lens, it did not become forbidden, it became visible. And visible, it turned out, was different. Visible, he could work with. Milo did not transform. Let us be accurate about this, because the whole genre lies about it. He set up an automatic transfer of $200 a month, because $1,000 was a fantasy and $200 was merely a Tuesday. He kept the coffee. He killed a streaming service he had forgotten he was paying for and could not, when pressed, name a single show on. Around then, he mentioned all of this to Penny, who works 2 desks over and has never once in her life mentioned a snowball. Penny saves almost nothing and seems, infuriatingly, fine. Milo asked her, a little defensively, whether she ever worried about any of it. Penny said she worried about plenty of things, just not about being slightly less ordinary by the age of 60. Milo did not have a reply ready. He noticed, uncomfortably, that he did not entirely disagree with her. He went home and kept the $200 transfer anyway, not because Penny was wrong, but because the snowball, he had decided, was his own to roll. Slowly. Downhill. On purpose. He missed the second month. He had a dental thing. He forgave himself, restarted in the third, and slowly discovered that forgiving himself and restarting was, in fact, the entire skill. There was no other skill hidden underneath it. The boring books make it sound like a discipline. It is closer to a habit of returning. There is a writer, Thomas Stanley, who studied actual wealthy households for a book called The Millionaire Next Door, and found that most of them looked nothing like the magazine version.
They drove ordinary cars. They lived below their means for so long that below their means simply became their means. They were, in a word, victors, the unglamorous, returning kind. There is a rat in Milo's family called Uncle Warren. Uncle Warren is old, says very little, and has, by some accounts, considerably more than anyone suspects, though no one has ever once seen him spend it. Milo called him, finally, and asked the question he had been circling for 20 minutes and several years. "Uncle Warren," he said, "how do I get to the first 100,000 faster?" There was a pause on the line, the particular pause of an old rat deciding exactly how much to say. Then Uncle Warren asked Milo a question right back. "Milo," he said, "when did you start?" Milo opened his mouth. He closed it again. The honest answer was last Tuesday, but the answer Uncle Warren was actually pointing at was the one Milo did not want, which was that the only lever that had ever truly mattered, the long hill, the very thing Munger had put first and Housel had underlined, was not a faster return, or a hotter stock, or a cleverer plan. It was time. And the most time Milo would ever have in his entire life was the precise amount he was holding right now, this evening, at 28 years old, with $412 in the bank and a phone going quiet against his ear. Neither rat said anything for a long while. It was the most useful silence of Milo's year. So Milo did one small thing, not a transformation, one thing. He moved his automatic transfer off the first of the month, when he tended to have strong opinions about his own money, and onto the day his paycheck actually landed, before any of those opinions had a chance to arrive. Pay the snowball first. Live on whatever is left. It is the oldest idea in all the boring books, and Milo had needed 20 minutes and one silence from his uncle to finally go and do it. Now, the question from the very beginning: why is the first 100,000 harder than the next million? Here is the answer Milo arrived at, and it is not the answer printed on the motivational posters. It is harder because, at the start, there is no snowball at all. There is only you, lifting every single dollar by hand, with no help from time and no help from compounding, very often out of a gap so thin it barely exists. The next million is easier, not because Milo gets smarter, but because the snowball eventually grows large enough to do the lifting for him. The cruelty and the mercy are the same exact fact, looked at from two ends. The beginning is all effort and no momentum, which is also precisely why the hardest part is the part most worth starting now, today, this evening, because it is the only part that ever buys the long hill. Milo did not get rich. He has, as of tonight, $412 and an automatic transfer of $200 that he intends to keep and will probably miss again in the spring. He is not transformed. He is just standing slightly higher up the hill than he was this morning, holding a very small snowball, looking down a very long slope. The wheel is still there, in the corner of the room, turning. It is only that Milo has stopped running quite so hard inside it. He has started instead to push something the other way. There is a next problem coming, and Milo can already feel its shape in the dark. Because somewhere down this hill, if everything goes the way the boring books quietly promise, there will be one strange month. The first month in Milo's entire life that his money earns more than Milo does. He has absolutely no idea what he will do on that day. Neither, honestly, does the narrator. That is the next thing we are going to watch. Until then, one specific request, and it is not the usual one. Everyone has a number they were stuck at for far too long, a balance that simply refused to grow, a figure that sat in an account for months, or years, like Milo's 412. Leave that number down in the comments, and one sentence about what finally moved it, if anything ever did. Milo is collecting them. He has developed a theory that nobody's first hill is ever quite as lonely as it feels while they are standing on it.